Here with Tyler Cassidy, host of Big East Barroom. We're going to talk about the Big East tournament in Madison Square Garden in an interesting year for the Big East because we might only have three bids unless we get a bid stealer here. So before we get into this bracket and what we think is going to happen Wednesday through Saturday, I just want to ask you, Tyler, what is your just assessment of what happened with the Big East this year, just metrically and just the results with some of these teams some teams with young players like Marquette that came along. And then, you have first year coach like Richard Pitino with Xavier. You have a team like DePaul that's not that good, but they just keep beating everyone. Well, how do you just assess overall what happened with the Big East this year?
Yeah, so I will preface this by saying that I am an eternal optimist. Like, I don't think that this is a precursor to what's going to happen for the Big East for years to come. I do think having three bids is not acceptable for the Big East. So, I mean, everyone's their own situation. Providence is obviously moving on for their head coach at the end of the year, so they acknowledge that there was a failure. Xavier was never going to be because they're bringing in 12 guys. Villanova brought in 10 new guys. So I think we just kind of missed on some people. And then you had the stalwarts, I'd say, from the Big East kind of leaving after last year. Ryan Kalkbrenner leaves Creighton, which is, I call him a statue-type player, where he should have a statue outside of Shy. Marquette has had a run of very good years, so they had to start over as well. So my hope is that this was an anomaly, some of the things that happened, but the Big East does need to get back up, and some of these programs have to decide. I think this is going to be next year is going to be the make or break year for a lot of these teams, whether they want to go in a different direction, same direction with these head coaches, because maybe the seat's not on fire for like a Georgetown or a Butler right now. But I think next year, if you fail again, then those seats are going to be pretty toasty.
Let's start with round one on Wednesday. Is there any team here that you think is a legit threat to make the semifinals? And if so, who stands out to you?
Yeah, so, I mean, the situation in Providence is unique. Spent big in the NIL in the offseason. Jalen Sellers is an absolute dog out there. Oswin's a great rim protector. My worry is their draw. They're playing St. John's in the next round. So, I do think Providence can win because they've already beaten St. John's at MSG this year. I also think that the way Marquette's playing, I want to give you credit because I wanted to come in here and talk about the Marquette Golden Eagles. And I was like, how do I say that they've been playing better and better, throughout the year? And you put up a stat today about their tort fit over the last, I believe, 2 months, I think you put up. Mm-hmm. And Marquette's 42nd in the country. So Marquette's not playing like the seventh best team in the Big East right now. And they just beat UConn. So if they get by Xavier and they play UConn for the second time in a week, I think they can make a run as well. I don't think Georgetown or DePaul is going to make a run though.
So what's interesting to me about the potential Marquette-UConn matchup, real quick, actually, I think Richard Pitino did a great job this year. I looked at that roster and was like, I only know a couple of these dudes, which doesn't happen to me. Yeah. It's at a high major. It just does not happen. Trey Carroll was such a dog, and it sucks that we're not going to get to see him play because there was just a flair to that team, especially when he was out there, and they're obviously the best three-point shooting team in the conference where you're like, some funky stuff could happen with Xavier on any given night, and I don't think that can happen without Trey Carroll. Yeah. The thing with Marquette and UConn, Marquette matches up well with UConn because we know a documented best way to give UConn fits is to turn them over. And that's all Marquette's really trying to do and what they've gotten better at this season and what they just did. The one thing I'm thinking about, though, is you've got 6 days for Danny Hurley to get ready for Marquette, because I'm not saying they're not going to prep for Xavier or that it's 6 days worth of game planning, but I just think it's tough to – it's like one perspective on it is Marquette just showed they can beat UConn. Here it is again. Stylistically, that will be the same. But the other part is like all the UConn fans are going to be there, and they just saw it. They should be better equipped to handle that pressure and hit more of their threes. So that's why it's a little frustrating about the draw with Marquette.
Yeah, and Marquette played like a bat out of hell in that game on Saturday. I mean, they tracked their deflections like a lot of teams do. They were all over every ball. And then Nigel James, I was surprised, gave Silas Demery fits because anytime UConn struggled defensively this year, it hasn't been Silas Demery who's been struggling. So for Nigel James to be able to get downhill repeatedly, I think he went for 17 and 7 in that game. Marquette, I agree with what you're saying in a large part. Like, I think Dan Hurley's just all he's going to have to do is print off the box score and put that on the bulletin board. and then UConn's going to be willing to run through a brick wall. But Shaka Smart's a damn good coach too, so I think he'll make a couple adjustments as well. So I just don't think UConn is yearning for another matchup against Marquette. I think if you're a UConn fan, you're going to be rooting for Xavier in that game, especially if Trey Carroll can't go.
Georgetown DePaul, it's hard for my eyes to see that 6 next to DePaul. Like, just all the credit in the world to Holtman. I know they just got smoked by Butler and Nova, not as worse of a loss, of course, but they had won 4 of 5 before that, with the only loss being by 3 to Providence. I'm leaning DePaul in this game, especially I assume there's no KJ Lewis still for Georgetown. Obviously, Langston Love, shocker, couldn't stay on the floor this year. But Vince has been playing well for Georgetown. I know they're bringing him off the bench a bit. Do we still think that Georgetown's the more talented team without KJ Lewis?
Yeah, and I think Georgetown might be the more talented team, but I think that's a direct indictment on Ed Cooley that he's not favored in this game. And shout out to Vince Iwuchukwu. I mean, to go after his heart procedure to come back and be playing at such a high level. I mean, I just want to give that kid all his flowers. I mean, if Holtman wins a game in the Big East and then gives Villanova a game, any coach at a different high major should be saying, that might be the guy I think I want to poach. But I think Georgetown does have more talent, and I still think DePaul's going to win that game.
Villanova make it. Oh, actually, let me talk about Providence really quick. In a situation like this, do the players rally around the noise outside the program? I know Kim is like playing dumb or whatever, which I don't know if that's the right thing to do. Maybe in his world, he's like, they can't fire me if I go win the tournament like Kevin Keats did. So, and because that offense is so explosive, you know, there's a chance that they can. I mean, we saw them, like you said, beat St. John's. And I know Vox was huge in that game against St. John's, but I don't think it's a coincidence that they won 2 games without Vox. As much as I like his talent, like, I can just sense some frustration with other players sometimes with him. And I mean, they've just been kind of funky with lineups all year. Like Jason Edwards only played 9 minutes last game. I mean, I just love Jameer Jones, Mila, Sellers, like just guys who know how to play. Like, if you don't want to give Kim English credit, the fact that this offense is 37th nationally in efficiency just shows you how damn talented that offense is. Do you think there's any world where Providence, you know, does? I mean, I know you touched on it briefly, but like how much confidence do you have in this team, like blocking out noise and like playing their best basketball?
Yeah, well, that's the problem. I don't have a ton of confidence in it. I think Kim English has not shown that he has been able to control the narrative of what's going on in a lot of ways. I do think if Providence is able to get by Butler, which is not a guarantee, you know, Michael Ajayi and Finley Bizjack are 2 really good players. You know, if they're able to get by them, Oswin is the kind of guy that could give Zuby Ejiofor fits. And I think that is important to note because he's got the body for it.
Looking at Creighton Seton Hall in this 5-4 matchup, played 2 extremely competitive games this year. Creighton won it 69-68 at home on February 7th, and then on January 4th, Seton Hall won 56-54. Or I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Yes, no, that's right. Seton Hall won 56-54, and Creighton won 69-68. So in the game Creighton won, they had 18 turnovers, and then the game Seton Hall won, they held Creighton to 54 points, which just shows me the type of havoc that Seton Hall can cause this Creighton team. And I mean, like, it's just been a weird thing all season of, I guess Josh Dix is your best player. At moments, it's Austin Swartz. Sometimes it's Nick Graves. Like, I know, and before the season was supposed to be Owen Freeman, so I know that's not like a total indictment on how good they actually are. But I mean, they lost 3 in a row before beating Butler here at the end. I'm just personally higher on Seton Hall. I don't know if I'm just a little biased because I just like the way they play, but to me, the way those first 2 games went just show you that the edge to the way these teams play goes to Seton Hall. How do you feel about these 2 teams? And if either of them's to beat St. John's, who would you lean?
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement with you that personally I like the way Seton Hall plays because, man, they get down in the dirt and they play hard-nosed basketball. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Creighton has had kind of every player takes a turn being really good, but they haven't had that alpha all season. I think both these games were decided by buzzer beaters. Nick Graves, I know for sure, hit one for Creighton to win that game. I forget who hit the one for Seton Hall, but I believe both games were discovered or were settled by buzzer beaters. So I don't think I actually think this is my, I guess, boldish prediction is that Providence would give St. John's a
Mhm.
tougher game than Creighton or Seton Hall. I think that both those teams are a little bit. Seton Hall, I thought, played a pretty game at the Rack the other day, or the Rock the other day, when they played against St. John's, when they were kind of playing to stay on the bubble. But I thought they kind of maxed out, and they still lost that game by about 10 points. So I think St. John's has proven that they are just unequivocally better than Seton Hall, at least. And Creighton is it's the weirdest season of Creighton of all time. However, I will put a caveat on if we're going to talk about narratives. Is there a world where Creighton says win one for McDermott before he goes if he's actually going? That's that's interesting to me, at least, to say that Coach McDermott might say he's done at the end of the year and the Creighton team is playing for him as their last
Interesting.
hurrah.
I didn't think about that, but I feel like a part of his soul is just longing for Ryan Kalkbrenner. Like it's hard to put into words how special he was to that program. Like just a generational college defender that you can build an entire system around. And I think it's wild that they're still fourth best in the country in foul rate, even though it's still a much higher rate than what it was at Kalkbrenner. But it's like not that the drop coverage is the exact same without with Trout out there as your five, but like the fact that that trend is there is just interesting to me. But that's definitely an interesting angle. I feel bad. I mean, I don't feel like I have the full context of what happened with Owen Freeman, and like I know it's been a while, so I feel like I kind of forgot. But Jackson McAndrew is like a dude. Like I thought he could have made it to the NBA after this year. So just a tough season for Creighton. But I don't know how much juice Seton Hall has after that. Kind of feel like their season was just really hurt by that St. John's loss.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm hoping that Seton Hall still finds that fire because I do think that they are a hungry team. They play down in the dirt, so I'm hoping. But I'm not wildly optimistic. I do think that St. John's rolls either of these teams that they play and ends up on a Saturday in the finals.
I'm not really interested in talking about Villanova, DePaul, but let's talk about a potential UConn Villanova matchup. Where are you at on these teams? And like Villanova for me has been a tough eval all season, just in the sense of in non-con, they were good. They beat Wisconsin before they kind of figured things out, and you got crushed by Michigan, and they looked pretty good in that BYU game. Then in Big East play, you're 0-4 against the top two teams, but you've taken care of business against everybody else. Caden Lewis definitely been playing better. Duke Brennan's really blown expectations out of the water, but then the Bryce Lindsey thing's a little weird because he was a stud early in the season. The number one thing that stands out to me is the non-Duke Brennan minutes are so brutal, and also what's up with Matt Hodge because I like him. I threw a lot at you about Villanova. Where are you at?
Yeah, well, Matt Hodge is going to miss the rest of the season. He tore his ACL, so he's done. I do think Villanova is going to sorely miss Matt Hodge. I really liked him as well. There is a thing about freshman point guards, that Caden Lewis and Nigel James are like the best, but you're also relying on a freshman point guard who makes freshman mistakes. So like his ceiling is so incredibly high. I think if this kid comes back, he's going to be first team All Big East. I think he was second team as of today when that just came out. So I really like this Villanova team. I think Kevin Willard, what he does really well is he ascends your floor so high. Your ceiling might not be like national championship in the first year, but he's putting 10 new players out there and he's going to make the tournament. So he deserves a lot of credit for what they did this season. Terrace Reed is a pretty good matchup for Duke Brennan. He's as physical as him. And, if you're right, if Duke Brennan isn't playing 35 minutes, that's really a problem for Villanova. So I looked to that matchup right away. UConn kind of caught fire in that game at the was that at the Finna Wells Fargo when they played at Villanova a couple weeks ago, and they blew them out. And then they blew St. John's out after that. So we thought UConn had kind of turned the corner. UConn is the biggest what if going into this. If UConn plays like they're capable of, like they did in the non-con, they're the best team. In my opinion, one of the best teams in the country. If UConn plays like they have for a lot of conference season, Villanova definitely has them and an opportunity where they can beat them. we'll see what happens. But I do like this Villanova team, and I think one name we didn't talk about is Tyler Perkins.
Yeah.
That is their do everything player. He is a winner. He is their Alex Caravan. Where if you need a play to be made at the end of the game, then he's going to make that play for you. So, huge shout out to Tyler Perkins.
The thing with me about this matchup is like, because they're both similarly half court style teams, I just trust UConn to out execute them. They're just better on both ends. So it's like needs some special individual playmaking and some bad shooting from UConn for them to get it done. What I want to dig a little deeper into UConn.
Yeah.
What do you assess, like, just what is your assessment of them, of why they don't play as well in certain moments, and even comparing them to past iterations? I know it's a little, lazy is not the right word. It's just like low hanging fruit, I guess, of the comp to Tristan Newton. They're obviously different players, him and Demery, but it's like, I feel like they need, because as great as Terrace is, he's not Sonogo or Klingon level dominant. Absolutely. And while sometimes Silas, I'm like, shoot, like he is kind of just like Newton, but the consistency hasn't been there, and they kind of need more from him. Like they need him to be a star, to be their best. Is kind of my assessment.
And I think that's totally fair, but also remember that the first national championship, Tristan Newton was probably the 5th best player on that team. Right.
Sure.
And it took him a while. And luckily, Silas has another year under Hurley, and second-year transfers end up being incredible. Okay, like a Baylor Shireman or even a Tristan Newton. These second-year transfers who really settle into the system end up being incredible. UConn, I mean, part of me, the optimistic side, wants to say that things are anomalies. Like, they're never going to shoot 3 of 24 like they did against Marquette yesterday, right? Mm-hmm. Braylon Mullins is too good of a shooter to probably ever in his life shoot 1 of 10 from 3. He's just that good. Caravan has never been held without a field goal in his college career until yesterday. So we're talking about that being an anomaly, but they are playing way too close to these teams. I think a lot of these Big East coaches have the scout on Hurley. Ed Cooley's been playing Dan Hurley every year he's been in the Big East. So Georgetown gives them a better game than they should. All these coaches that have been around are giving them better games. So optimistically, I want to say that UConn is going to be fine when it gets to the NCAA tournament, but we're talking about the Big East tournament. So is there an opportunity for them to get picked off? I absolutely think so. And I think that you're what you're right, 100% right about is that if Silas Demery is this All-American type player like we've seen in certain games, that he's kind of the straw that stirs the drink. I also think Terrace Reed defensively is a huge, he gets lost in pick and roll sometimes. And when Terrace Reed plays well defensively, I thought that was the biggest thing when they beat St. John's by 31 the other night, that Terrace Reed was locked in defensively as well. So I do think it's a little concerning that we keep saying, okay, if this clicks for UConn, then they're going to be fine. And if this clicks for UConn, they're going to be fine. And now we're talking about that they just lost the regular season finale when they had everything in the world to play for. They just lost the Big East regular season championship by losing that game. That they still haven't figured it out completely. So all that to say that I think UConn is still the best team in the Big East, but I absolutely think that they can lose.
Talk to me a little bit about this that you hinted at. You said some of these teams that are familiar with seeing Hurley, it becomes easier. Is this just about tracking the off-ball movement? Is that like kind of the main thing that stands out, not being as rattled by the way that they're just running around offensively?
Yeah, and the Big East, for better or worse, is some of the things they let go off the ball, they don't let go in the tournament. I think that's why St. John's got in a lot of trouble last year. They played an extremely physical style of play in the Big East, and when they got into the tournament, they got a bad whistle or whatever. Kadari fouls out of that game and they lose. So I think also knowing their sets and what they're going to run, Marquette just on Saturday ran that really good pressing defense where they were really on the ball, and they're pressuring them and they're really physical with them, and they were able to disrupt the guards and take them off their spots. But we'll see. Kevin Willard seeing them a third time there. If we're both going chalk, I haven't got a prediction from you either. Are you going chalk all the way through here?
I'm gonna get to that at the end. I got one.
I don't want to say that.
I conventional wisdom just has me thinking we're gonna get round 3 of UConn St. John's. Just the fact that it's basically a home game for both of them every time, and just that they've been consistently the clear two best teams. My worlds where something funky happens is Providence could beat St. John's, Marquette could beat UConn, or Seton Hall could beat St. John's. I think those are the three that I kind of have circled, but I'm expecting UConn, St. John's, and 72-40 is just so nuts to see as a final score. Obviously, St. John's beat them in the first one. When you think about these two teams matching up, what stands out as the biggest swings? I assume it has to do with the fact that St. John's offensively can get bogged down when they're not running, which we saw against UConn.
Yeah, and UConn, I believe in that game switched 1-5, which they normally, or 1-4, which they normally don't do, and they were able to disrupt a lot of what St. John's does. I think if we get around 3 of that matchup, obviously the lazy take is Zubia Ejiofor versus Terrace Reed. I mean, those are 2 of the better players in the country, and if one of them gets into foul trouble, what's going to happen? But I thought Dylan Mitchell is kind of the X factor for St. John's throughout this whole entire tournament. He makes so many winning plays on the court. He's not a great shooter, but he makes so many winning plays. And I thought UConn did a really bad job of preventing that the first time they played at Madison Square Garden. I thought Dylan Mitchell was great, and I thought Dylan Mitchell really struggled the second time they played. So if we get that third matchup, and we got 2 Hall of Fame coaches going at each other too for a third time at Madison Square Garden on a Saturday night, I'm just not sure there's a better thing in the world. And 2 guys who have also talked about what the Big East tournament means to them. I know you're a lot more dialed into college basketball outside of the Big East than I am. It just feels like the Big East tournament also still has that juice. I could be wrong, but you play at Madison Square Garden. Pitino, Hurley. Just feels like this one would mean a lot to both of them for a feather in their cap.
Yeah, and just in terms of the Big East tournament, real quick, I just love that every team plays every team twice, because every matchup here is a third matchup. Like, Duke didn't play Miami this year, and that's 2 of the top 3 teams they see. Like, that's just silly to me, and I could go on a whole tangent there. But to dig a bit deeper into St. John's, like, I don't want to oversimplify it, because I understand that they're on a national level elite with their physicality, with their athleticism. Like, just having Bryce Dillon and Zuby is so crazy as a combination. But, like, to me, it just feels like they can overwhelm in a like, think about last year when they played Arkansas in the second round. And if they didn't play Arkansas, they would play Kansas. It's not the same kind of game. And just offensively, it's just a little archaic. Like, there's just part of me that's like, Rick, can't you just bring in an offensive coordinator and like do your thing with your psychological coaching, your defensive coaching, your emotional coaching? That all is great, but there's just something a little bit too archaic for me. Like, when they played Alabama in that game, that was a gem of a game from Alabama. I know that was a while ago, but it's just like such a contrast, and even to UConn as well. Like, how bullish are you on St. John's and just to make noise in the NCAA tournament?
Oh man, this is because I put on the Big East homer hat a lot. I love that role. St. John's ran into the problem last year. They ran into a middling team that had they had underperformed in the regular season, Arkansas, and they had these incredible athletes, and they ran into that. I see a similar thing happening. Zubia Ejiofor is able to dominate right now in the Big East. He's not going to be the biggest guy when he plays that 6 seed in the next round,
right.
Assuming they get past the first round. So it's also a whistle thing with St. John's. I do think that they get not away with a lot of things, but they can play physically a little bit more in the Big East, and that any tighter of a whistle, they're in a little bit of trouble. So I don't want to bet against Rick Pitino, but a team that doesn't shoot incredibly well always scares me, although nobody can shoot in the Big East NCAA tournament anymore. So I don't know how much that matters. And a team that's only really returning one player that's played a lot of meaningful NCAA tournament minutes scares me too, although these guys have been on a stage there. So my Big East homer hat wants to say, you know what, St. John's is going to the Final Four. In my personal bracket, I will have them getting picked off a little bit early by a Arkansas type team, maybe like a Tennessee or Vanderbilt type team that's, top 30-ish in the country, but has the athletes to compete. And, if they get in as a 6 seed, they might be, or, one of those seeds that could, disrupt St. John's. So I'm going to be optimistic, but I'm not wildly optimistic about St. John's.
What are your thoughts on Ian Jackson and just what's happened with him this season? Like, this is now 2 years where he hasn't lived up to expectations. Do you think it's a defensive thing with him? Like, as great of a basketball player as Dylan Darling is, I feel like there's no reason that Dylan Darling should be playing more than him.
Yeah.
Let me rephrase that. He does deserve to be playing based on what's happened, but like that shouldn't be the outcome.
If you look at him talent wise, like Ian Jackson probably beat Dylan Darling 11-0 1-on-1. Yeah. I mean, that's Ian Jackson looks the part and, has played at the high majors. I have a good friend who is a UNC, tapped into UNC, and he was like, he falls asleep from time to time. Like, just be careful. And I think one of the things Pitino's shown over the last couple of years is if you're not going to play his style of basketball and you're not going to lock in defensively and, you're going to struggle, he's going to play someone else over you pretty quickly. And I know Ian Jackson didn't get a wildly long leash, and Pitino has already kind of come out and said he's not coming back next year. He's kind of given him the RJ Lewis treatment, although RJ Lewis is a lot better than Ian Jackson. So, I mean, I just don't think he's locked into the way Rick Pitino wants to play defense. And he is a point guard, but I don't think he's like the truest of point guards. And Darling does a little bit of better job, being a pest on defense and passing the ball around a little bit. And Dylan Darling's played really well and shot the ball pretty well. So I agree that Ian Jackson should be sitting there going, how did Dylan Darling get more minutes than I do? But at this point, I don't blame Pitino for why he's doing it.
I like the way Darling guards, and I like his vision and shooting and everything, but like sometimes I feel like he's a little too aggressive offensively, and I'm kind of like, why? And I get it. It's because Pitino's probably like, go, 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 like any other guard, but he's just like, it just looks like he's playing a little bit out of himself. And like, I don't know. My commentary on the other guards is I think Sannon and Sellers ignoring their 35% marks, like those guys to me are very good 3-point shooters. I think those guys could shoot 40% on a team that had a little bit better spacing. I'm just tired. Like, I don't want to see Bryce shooting it. I'm fine when Zuby's left open to shoot it. This is also a way of me saying free Ruben Prey. I want more Ruben Prey minutes. I think he's good. But I don't know. There's just, I think we're aligned on the idea of this team's strengths don't super translate against the better teams in college basketball. And that's why when you look at in non-con, I understand the lot's happened since then, but they lost to Alabama, Iowa State, Auburn, and Kentucky. Yep. And who'd you beat? Ole Miss and Baylor. They're not tournament teams.
Yes. And their three best players, exactly what you just said, are Hopkins, Zuby, and Dylan Mitchell. And I would be kind of fine with any of them shooting if I was playing against them. And that's kind of scary. And that was kind of aligned to what last year was too, where they're, three of their best players, Kadari, RJ, and Zuby, weren't known as big time shooters. Osiah Sellers, I think, is the X factor for this team. The kid, the stroke looks fine, like a 40% shooter, like you said. The kid looks like he should be able to, and I like that he can kind of create his own shot. Mm-hmm. He's one of those 3-point shooters that can, shoot off the dribble a little bit. So I like that. So if Osiah Sellers goes nuts, sure. Sandin takes a lot of mid-range jumpers, which archaic was the perfect word to describe that. So if I would play Sellers and Darling together in certain points, and then Mitchell, Hopkins, and Zuby, and hope that you can figure it out.
Last thing. Here are the odds. Does anything jump out to you as what, if I gave you $50 of Monopoly money, how you would use it?
Can I split it, or do I have to use it on
You can split it.
Okay. So I'm putting $10 on Seton Hall. They are playing close to home. They are playing they play a style of basketball that is so ugly. And that is with all the love in the world towards Seton Hall. They want to get down in the dirt and play the game in the 40s or 50s. So I'm putting at least $10 on Seton Hall, and then I'm taking my last 40 and I'm putting on UConn and St. John's. I think that those are the best teams. If you can get plus money for those teams, I think that's the way to go. Respect to Xavier, DePaul, Georgetown, and Butler. You know what? Give me $2. I'm putting on Providence as well. So give me 19 on St. John's and UConn, and $2 on Providence.
So you're splitting UConn and St. John's. You're not playing a favorite here?
I just think that if I get to championship, if I get to championship Saturday and those two are playing against each other and I plus money for both of them, I'm like,
But you're playing a losing game, Tyler, because if UConn wins, you're down $30, and if
that's
St.
true.
John's wins, you're down $10.
I'm not a great bettor. So all of this was, you also gave me free money. So all of this is just profit. I understand. Yeah, no, I think the matchup, if you can bet an exact matchup for plus 400 UConn St. John's, I'm taking that. And that's what I think we're gonna end up with on Saturday night for sure.
St. John's won it last year. What happened? Who beat UConn last year in the Big East?
Creighton.
Right.
Jemiah Neal dunked and Hassan Diarra won.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay, one last UConn point I wanted to say.
Yeah.
In terms of them for the NCAA tournament, it's impossible for me to look. I get why they're 11th in Ken Palm. It makes sense, right? And I understand that they were in position to get that number 1 seed if they went out over Florida. You have that head-to-head as well. But no matter what their Ken Palm is, whatever, whether they're a 2 or if some, I don't think they can fall to a 3. Their resume is probably too strong. But the reason I still think this team is extremely live to win a title, even though with all the considerations we pointed out, is they sun-run the tournament 2 straight years, and then last year when their team was not nearly as good, they should have beat Florida. Florida won the title, and that was when Hassan Diarra. I mean, Demery's better than Hassan Diarra. You get an extra year at Caravan. Like
Terrace is a lot better than Samson Johnson.
Terrace is a lot better than Samson Johnson. Like, this team is deeper. It's got absolutely 3-point shooting. It's got pros. I still think in like you said, preparing for UConn on short notice and just playing, they've just been a great non-conference team, outside of Maui last year. Like, they've been a great non-conference team the past few years. So I still am a believer in UConn for the tournament. And if they lose to St. John's or something, or Marquette or Nova, they could be a fun Final Four sleeper for your bracket that people might be afraid to click.
Absolutely. And I have such a problem with, I know you're tapped in as anybody on Twitter, that everyone's saying there's 4 teams that can win a national championship, right? Michigan, Duke, Florida, and Arizona. And it's like, well, UConn played Arizona to like a 2-point game without Terrace Reed. So whatever. I just watched Michigan struggle with Iowa. And I'm not saying Iowa's not good, but that game was a wildly close game. UConn has beaten Florida, so what does that mean? And I never know what to do with the ACC. I mean, I've watched Duke lose to a UNC team with Caleb Wilson, and I'm always hesitant to rely on teams that are relying on freshmen, because the lights get brighter, and then all of a sudden Houston's in your Final Four because they have like 14 seniors on their team. Mm-hmm. So I can't think of any of those 4 head coaches out of those 4 teams that have kind of been now the proverbial favorites that would look and say, oh, Dan Hurley's on our side. I'm happy about that. So I'm very bullish on UConn making a run, and the non-con, for the last 4 years has been where UConn has, excelled. So we're looking at, they're going to be playing a lot of non-con games coming up after the Big East tournament.
One final thing to your point, just about the consensus idea about these 1 seeds. Like, I just want to remind everyone, like, Houston needed a inbounds play to beat Purdue. Florida could have lost to Texas Tech, to UConn. Like, even this year, I don't think Michigan's as good without LJ Kaysen. If Caleb Foster's out, like let's all not be too short-sighted into what last year was with 4-1 seeds. Like, madness happens. And like, Duke and Michigan are not as good as they were when they played each other. Like, Arizona still has struggled with Tommy Lloyd to like really power through. And then Florida, as great as they've been playing, has anyone in the SEC really match up with them well enough in the front court? I don't know. I just giving everyone to open their mind to that a lot of teams can win the title and a lot of funky things can happen.
I think that's the most rational point I've heard on it for a while. I think it's a little clickbaity for people to be like, there's 4 teams that can win a national championship. It's like, well, okay, I'm old enough to remember just 2-3 years ago when FAU was in the championship, or St. Mary's was in the championship. Come on, like let's not do just this for clicks on right before we get into March Madness.
I agree. Well, Tyler, it's been a blast chopping it up with you. If you made it to the end, that means you're a real ball knower and ball learner and appreciator, because I thought this was a high quality breakdown. We had a great Big East guest, and yeah, breaking it down for what I will still say is the best conference tournament in college hoops. Thanks again for joining, Tyler.
ODJ, you're the best in the business. Everyone should be following and subscribing. But if you're watching this, you probably already are.
Appreciate it, brother.